This one might make you angry. I'm just going to warn you right here and now. The industry itself has gotten ridiculously greedy, and overtime is a really big way where agencies make even more money than they do on you on an hourly basis on every assignment. This also goes for the most part, on callback and to some part on holiday pay. But if there's an episode at the very beginning of the season you need to listen to, this is it. Overtime on this week's edition of Travel Evolved. It's Travel Evolved. I'm Mark Holloway. Welcome, everybody, to the episode. Oh, man. You see the smile? The smile means this is one of those episodes that you guys have got to listen to this one. This is every time I talk to a traveler and I say, have you thought about this? 99% of the time, I don't care if you're a 20-year travel veteran or you're a brand new traveler with less than a year of experience as a traveler, everybody's like, wait, what? What do you, oh my gosh. And sometimes the reaction is anger because people realize how long they've been gotten, I'm trying to clean it up, by agencies. And guys, today is one of those that you just got to listen to this. This is an episode I would ask many of you to share with as many travelers as you can, because this is not the way the industry was created. Overtime is an opportunity right now and has been. It's not even an opportunity. It is a standard that agencies are getting you really well by only paying you time and a half of your taxable income, which is what most of you guys sign off on every single day and every 13 weeks. Go ahead and just pay me a portion, I should say, go ahead and just pay me time and a half of just a portion of my actual hourly income. I'll get into this in a minute, but that's exactly what all of you, except for a rare exception, like I say, 99% of the people that have me look at their offers are like, wait, what? Now, here's the thing. It has become the industry standard to pay overtime incorrectly and improperly because an agency can offer you anything that they want to, provided you say, doop-a-doo, okay, I'll sign that all day long. And so many of you are. And I'm not trying to beat you up, but I'm trying to wake you up a little bit to say, guys, look at this. Stop this. This has become what used to be kind of an every once in a while wrinkle that some agencies, started doing, to now every agency is doing this. So we're going to get into this. This is a fun episode for me because it just shows how ugly my side of the industry has become. And it's ugly. You guys are already the ones. I mean, again, this industry, let me just pause for a minute. Let me just get on a soapbox. This industry is all the hard work is done by you guys. I don't care what your modality is, what your specialty is. You guys are the ones that are going out there and doing literally all of the work. And again, we're not talking about something that's just kind of a relatively difficult job, right? This would be the same thing if we were, and I'm just going to get on a tangent, but if you were staffing law enforcement, you're putting your life on the line if you're a police officer. And if there was a company that was working for part-time or travel police or law enforcement, it wouldn't be any different. I think teachers are the same way. Incredibly important job, not quite as risky, although maybe it is right now with how crazy our world is. But you guys put your license on the line every second of every day. Your certification, because you are working in a facility that you oftentimes don't know what their rules are, what their protocol is, and sometimes you're even being asked to do things that are against what you believe you should be doing. Let's just throw that out there. That's the truth. So I've never seen an industry that an agency sits back and just rakes in the money for literally doing what? Credentialing you? Right? Doing a couple background checks, having you pee in a cup, maybe doing something more significant than that, making sure all your medical immunizations are up to date with the help and coercion of either the vendor or the facility, by the way. It's not just they're doing on their own. So there's that. Okay, is that worth 30+% of a bill rate? I don't think so. Obviously, there's a bunch of recruiters to pay to trumpet all the jobs that all of us all have. So that's really where the expense comes in, is that we've got to have a bunch of recruiters harassing you and haranguing you day in and day out, hoping that they'll catch you, and that somehow miraculously, as I've said many times before, that our version of the same job that 300 companies all have somehow miraculously hits home with you, and you say, yes, I want to work for that individual and that company for the same job, and work next to 5 other travelers working for 5 other different companies, and hoping that my offer is the best. What I'm getting at is that we do very little. I mean, I right now, every recruiter's going, what? I work my fanny off. Well, do you? Do you really work your fanny off? You make a bunch of phone calls. You work hard at trying to convince people to take a job through you and not through somebody else. That's true. I will give a recruiter that. But what agencies bring to the table, in my opinion, is honestly very little. And I believe it's going to become less and less. That's just my opinion, because I think things are changing in 2022. My point being is that we're already making enough money. I mean, we float payroll. We float a bill, an invoice out to a facility or a vendor, and we pay you literally 5 days later, which means we get an invoice in or we get a timesheet in over the weekend. We cut an invoice, and then we basically a couple days later put you in payroll, and we're actually being charged sometime on Wednesday or Thursday for that invoice we sent out on Monday, and then we wait 6 to 7 to 8 weeks to get paid on it. That, my friends, is what our real benefit is in this entire cycle. We are a payroll floating mechanism so that the facilities can stave off paying somebody immediately. They can wait 6 weeks, so either Medicare, insurance, or a patient's actual personal pocketbook will pay for their stay at that facility or the procedure at that facility. And it just helps that system. By the way, but it's at a much higher rate, as you guys all know, than what they would pay someone hourly. But it does work. But what I'm getting at is that this episode is going to make you mad because, like I said, we already were making good money pre-pandemic. The pandemic, as many of you guys know, has made some agencies greedier because, like I said before many times, with travelers making so much money over the last few years, they stopped focusing on, I wonder what other agencies are making, because they just wanted to keep their own paycheck and just kind of keep it themselves and laugh all the way to the bank, which was great. Not to mention that most agencies said, please don't discuss your pay rate. And they still do. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that they're trying to say you are not allowed to talk about what you make compared to another traveler in the unit? If that agency was proud of what they were taking, how little they were taking, how much they were paying you, would they be upset or concerned about you talking to a traveler? No, they'd be saying, go ahead. I feel confident that you're going to be one of the top paid, if not the top paid person on that floor or that unit. But that's not what you're hearing, is it? So if your agency is telling you not to discuss your pay rate, think about why. You guys do anyway. So an agency can say it all day long until they're blue in the face. And even if that's their rule, their law, whatever it is, you guys are still talking rate. People can't stop you. I can't stop an internal person from discussing what their salary is with somebody else. I can ask them not to, but there doesn't mean that I can make them not. That's not a thing. It's not a thing with travelers either. But it's become so apparent that nowadays agencies actually have you guys believing that you're not allowed to discuss that. And sometimes hospitals get involved. Don't discuss that. The reason they do is they don't want that. I want to jump ship from this agency to work for one that pays more, because that's a pain in the butt for them. They don't like that. They'd rather you just be kind of compliant and deal with making less money than someone working alongside you, because it's easier for that facility. So that's why if a facility says don't discuss pay rate, it's because they just don't like the baloney that goes along with it. It's not because they really don't want you to know what each other's making. It's that they don't want you to say, I don't want to work for XYZ company. I want to go work for ABC company because they're paying more. That's difficult for them. And oftentimes it means they're going to lose you for 13 weeks because that agency has a clause that says you can't continue with another company for that reason. Wow, that was a really big intro to overtime. But I did that specifically because my whole point being is that we're making enough money. We don't need to be increasing our margins for hours, and really hear this, for hours that are more above, I should say above and beyond what we're anticipating for the most part, unless it's a 48-hour guarantee assignment, which does happen. We'll discuss that. But for the most part, when you're dealing with overtime, especially, we're not talking about callback or holiday. We've talked about that before. But on today's discussion for overtime, that means you've typically either worked over your 40 hours if you're an 8-hour a day employee, 40-hour a week employee, or you've gone into over 40 hours if you're a 36-hour a week or 12-hour shift employee, which means the agency has made 4 hours more at a regular rate and now 8 hours more, or just 8 hours more for those 40-hour week people than they anticipated on this particular week. And maybe that's going to happen periodically throughout the assignment. So what I'm getting at, and I want you guys to really keep that in mind as I'm talking about this, this is additional income that everybody's getting. The agency's getting it. The hospital's getting additional hours. They're paying for it. And I'll talk about how they're paying for it. It's not as bad as that. It's at a discounted rate for them. But of course, you're getting extra money for it. So everybody should be kind of winning. The reason the hospital is asking you to do overtime is for a reason. It might be better, or they may be stuck with nobody else coming in there or anybody else available. So that's what they've chosen to do. So everybody kind of wins, but the agency wins more than you do. And let's talk about it. So first and foremost, as always, guys, I did hit a really great milestone on interestingly enough, on the YouTube channel. We had a number of subscribers that got me really fired up, which was a milestone for me. And I wanted to do it right at a year, and I did. So I'm very proud of ourselves and our team for getting that done. We did it, and it was a lot of promotion. It was a lot of, please check us out. Please watch us. Please share this. And it's amazing that I don't really always see and kind of feel the momentum out there. But every once in a while I'll talk to somebody, or they'll text me and they'll be so gracious about what it is that we're doing here that it just kind of blows me away. I forget. Someone says, you've really made a difference, or I listen to you adamantly, or I've learned a lot. Even something simple like I learned something. It goes a long way for us here because, like I've said many times before, this is not part of my job. This is something that I'm doing to, I think, really advance and improve healthcare travel, because you guys got to understand this. And I think it's time that we stopped living behind cloaks and screens and openly talked about things that I think is going to make everybody better. And by the way, it's going to make agencies better too. So every agency, every recruiter out there that's mad at me and is going to be even more angry with me out this episode, in the long run, I think you're going to be fine, because you're going to change the way you're doing business potentially if enough people listen to this stuff and start demanding it. And when I say people, I'm talking about you travelers. Or you're going to end up going to work for a company that does it. So you'll be happier in the long run, because this is important. So anyway, rates are dropping right now, which means that right now the overall bill rates are decreasing. I've told you before, almost everybody I talk to, including my own internal people, are being offered extensions at lower and lower rates than certainly what they were originally. Their first 13-week assignments were. It just happens to be the sign of the times. There is less and less need than there was, and there is a surplus of supply, so to speak. So we're in a situation now where competition is super fierce. There are fewer and fewer jobs. I've got quality travelers sitting there just floating around in front of numerous positions they've been submitted to, just waiting. And what's crazy is that what we don't know is there better profiles and submissions that from other companies that we've seen than this person has, or is the unit manager or a department head or a CFO of that facility or someone who's in charge of accounting kind of holding on saying, wait, let's wait a little bit. Can we get by? And maybe we can drop the rate more. What I can tell you is that I'm hearing from everybody is that there's not a lot of movement. So if you get an offer, I'd probably say jump on it. I don't care, at this point, if if it makes sense financially to you, and you don't have the opportunity to kind of shop it around, you should probably jump on some jobs that say gainfully employed. I've always said that. But you really do need to know what you're signing off on, and you should be questioning an actual contract, which, by the way, most of the things we're talking about today are not written down clearly in your contract. Sometimes it is, but I've seen contracts that don't talk about specifically what your overtime rate. There's just an assumption that it is what I said already, and that is that it's 1.5 of your taxable hourly rate, and you guys are agreeing to it. So this is an important episode, I think, for you guys, because the fact that many of you are not making the income that you have been making for the last couple of years, and none of us thought you guys were, and I don't think most of you thought you would continue to make that. But because bill rates are dropping, which means I'm assuming pay rates are dropping, and I'm sure probably at a disparagement of level, so to speak. That's why when you do have some holiday, when you do have some overtime, and certainly, callback, this becomes a more important episode for you to pay attention to, because I do believe there are going to be more and more companies that start to go, okay, I'll pay you properly. So first and foremost, this is kind of a piggyback off of episode number 9 it was called Company Margins. Way back, early on in the first season, we did an episode. It was number 9, so reference it if you guys want to check it out or hear it. It just talks about company margins in general. And then episode 41, which wasn't too long ago, obviously, 12 episodes ago, a few months ago, we did hours 36 to 40. The same principle is going to be discussed here. So if you've listened to that, you're going to be way ahead of the game when it comes to these numbers, and I'll try to talk as accurately as I can. Again, you guys know I've got some notes down, but they're just bullet points, right? So I have to kind of talk off the cuff. So I hope I speak correctly, because sometimes I've been known to actually say something wrong, and I have to go back and go, oh, geez, forget about it. But that's an episode as number 41 would be a great episode to also kind of refresh yourself with, or listen to it after you kind of, maybe your curiosity is piqued by this episode. So here's what I will tell you. First thing, I want to give agencies, I want you guys to understand that when we are dealing with overtime, the overwhelming majority of time, I want to say well into the 90, let's say 95% of the time, our overtime bill rate is usually anywhere from $5 to $10 more per hour than the regular rate is. And the reason for that, if I can just pause for a minute, is because hospitals figured out about 15 years ago, if my time frame is about right, because it didn't used to be this way, that when it comes to overtime, the only thing that they should be, in fact, increasing their bill rates for is simply for payroll, because there's not additional housing costs to keep you there. There shouldn't be, unless you're going back and forth, but that's not on the hospital. That's your decision to not get a place for a monthly basis. So they don't want to pay more for that. There shouldn't be any additional income for any kind of insurance, for travel to the 13 weeks and home from the 13 weeks. There typically isn't any additional expenses that you should be incorporating for anything that you have as far as meals, incidentals, and everything else that go. You're there for 7 days a week. So hospitals have said, why are we taking, let's say, we're going to go way back a long time ago and say, let's say we had a $50 bill rate. Because, by the way, it wasn't maybe 12 years ago that was a pretty normal bill rate for a travel nurse. So why are we paying, $75 or 1.5 of that $50? God, I'm totally dating myself. And you guys are going, what? That's ridiculously low. I make more than that myself. Yes, you do. But why are we paying time and a half of that rate to this agency when the only thing that they are increasing is their actual payroll cost and, of course, their taxes on their payroll? So they got smart and they said, for overtime, we're only going to let you bill us this much an hour. Now, sometimes that is a percentage. I've seen contracts still this day and age that still have like 1.33. 1.5 is incredibly rare, if not completely gone from the industry. It should be, because it's actually a waste of money. Hospitals shouldn't have to pay that. Multiplier 1.15, 1.22, 1.33. I've seen those, but most of the big vendors have a fixed cost that here's exactly what it is. And again, I've got a couple that are big ones that are $8 more an hour, $10 more an hour is kind of standard. So if you've got, let's say, $100 bill rate this day and age, it may be $110 that we're billing for anything over 40 hours a week, unless it's California, which is a whole different monster. I don't really think I'm going to talk too much about California today. You guys know the rules. We are going to talk about California in its own separate episode, which obviously has a daily overtime. But I want you guys to understand that the one thing I'm going to say is that agencies aren't billing a crazy amount of additional money. It's not like that would be the case. And it was a long time ago. And that was ridiculous, because we were all making huge money for anything over 40 hours because it was all of our fixed costs were already incorporated. I think I've kind of explained it, so hopefully that makes sense. But I want you guys to understand there is an additional, but it's not what you may have thought it was. It's not like, and I do know people still think this, that it's 1.5 of a bill rate for anything on 40, and it's just almost never the case. But it's additional, and it's there for design so that we actually can afford to pay time and a half of what your hourly rate should be and be able to pay those payroll taxes that are incorporated in that. Because as you guys all know, every dollar we pay you, we have to pay Uncle Sam on the front end a payroll tax. It's not, it's separate from what you guys are getting billed by the government, so to speak, that you're having to have taken out of your check. We have a payroll tax. So I said before, like when I pay myself, I get dinged on the front end when I have to pay the payroll tax myself, and I also get dinged personally when I have to pay my own payroll tax. It just is one of those things. So please understand that. That's one of the biggest, I think, missing keys that a lot of travelers don't think about. And maybe it's because you guys never ran a business or you've never worked in a payroll department, which is totally understandable, that for every dollar an agency spends, depending upon the city, the county, the state that you're in, there is payroll costs that are associated with that. So it's not like here's a dollar, we pay a dollar to you, and that's all it costs us. It's more than a dollar. And again, it does fluctuate depending upon all those different nuances. So I want you guys to understand that. So that's part of the whole thing today that we're going to talk about. So there's that. The real kicker, like I said a few minutes ago, focus on this. These are extra hours the agency is not depending upon. So let's talk about that for a minute again, a little more detail. Every company I know of that's worth its weight or has been around for longer than a couple of years, which maybe there's a few out there that aren't this way because of how many new agencies there are out there right now. Everybody has some form of a calculation that they're using, whether it's through a software that they have that they purchased that is part of staffing. There are staffing softwares out there, or they've developed their own internally, or they have their own some sort of calculator. Wow, I can't even talk today. Some sort of calculator that says, here's what we're anticipating. The number one thing that is predicated on is the total number of hours that are anticipated. So it's basically the number of weeks times the number of hours per week that they're expecting. And that's the first, I guess, part of the equation that's factored in there. So like I've always said before, a 13-week assignment based on 36 hours is 468. That is the figure that the agency is in hoping for when they decided to start to quote you what they're willing to pay you. It's always based upon that. If there's less, they're kind of screwed. And that's why agencies are like, oh, you got to get your hours in. That's why they'll ding you for certain things if you're only getting 24 hours and you're repeatedly sick, because that means they've overpaid for you. Every hour that you don't get that's less than that 468 for a 36-hour work week person or employee, that hurts their margin. It actually shrinks their margin because you didn't get the hours in. So it means that every hour you did work cost them more. They're hoping that minimally you get that 468 hours. For a 40-hour person that works 13 weeks, it's 520. Those are the magical numbers. And obviously any derivative of there. If you're 13 weeks and you only work, if you're 36 hours, you only work 8 weeks, you figure out that. If you're only a 6-week contract or a short 4-week contract, all of it is the first part of the equation that's factored in. From there, obviously they've got all their different nuances. We're not going to talk about that today, but what I'm getting at is that if in fact you are working more than those 468 or 520, the whole point I'm trying to make is that is additional revenue that agency wasn't counting at. When I see someone who repeatedly gets 37 and a half, 38 hours every single week, that's a good thing for our company, for the profit that we're making, because it means we're making more money than we thought we were going to make because you're working more. Yes, absolutely. We're paying you more, but it's additional hours, if that makes sense. So we win more because it's every time we had our calculation of what it was hourly we're making off of you, there's 2 or 3 more hours maybe every week that we're making that, which is good. It should be that you get your share of that. You're not. That's where you're going to get angry with me today, but it's the fact. So that's what I'm trying to point out. And so a lot of companies use this thing by saying, oh, we can't pay you more because, and they'll give like 5 or 6 different reasons why you can't make more money. And once I tell you what we're thinking about doing and what we're doing, or I should say what they should be doing, whoops, Freudian slip there, they're going to give you a bunch of excuses why they can't. And the one thing I want you to remember is that, but wait a minute, recruiter, account manager, vice president, president, whatever it is, these are more hours and extra hours than you were anticipating. So why is it that I shouldn't be making more, and you actually should be making less of a margin. And I'm going to show you they're actually making more. So keep that in mind when you're negotiating, which is unfortunate. You guys have to negotiate. When you're arguing with somebody and you're saying, hey, this is baloney. This is more. I just worked, 470 hours instead of 468. So why for these two shouldn't I be making more? Because it's more than what you thought you're going to make off of my sweat and my hard work and my risk. So keep that in mind as we're talking about this today. Okay, so here's where we're going to break it down. And it's going to go pretty quick, but I'm going to try to go as thoroughly as I can on this. When you get paid, here, tell me if this all sounds familiar. I know it does. I talk to probably 2 people a day anymore. It seems like it's more and more. And I apologize for many of you. I get a schedule when we're going to talk, and then I get busy. So I know I've got a bunch of people that I oftentimes don't get a chance to talk to. But for the most part, I'm talking probably about 10 to 14 people a week. Here's what I'm hearing everybody says. Here's exactly how you are quoted a rate. Here is your taxable hourly income. And I don't know, but let's just pretend that's $50 an hour to make it life easy. For every hour you work, this agency XYZ is going to pay you $50 an hour, and they're going to tax you on that $50 an hour. Then we're going to give you a weekly amount that's tax-free. Let's say it's, $413. That is a common low, rural type, lower economy, typical 7-day-a-week amount that's tax-free. So there's a $413, that's tax-free, and then you've got your taxable. Housing's a whole separate issue. We're not going to discuss housing today. We have lots of episodes we will. But if you follow me, you are making $50 an hour, and you're also making $413 a week. Now, if you're a 36-hour work week, I'm going to do the math here. If you take 413 and divide it by 36, that's $11.47. That's your income too. It just happens to be that it's tax-free because they took that whole $11.47 and spread it out over the course of an entire week, which means for that week and those 36 hours they're anticipating, they're going to pay you $413. So again, $413, that weekly tax-free stipend they're giving you divided by the number of anticipated hours you're working, which is either 36 or 40, should give you an hourly rate. So you have a taxable rate and you have a tax-free rate. It just so happens that most agencies talk about that tax-free rate in a weekly sum because it kind of hides it a little bit more. But the fact is, both of these incomes together are your income. Does that make sense? Just one of them happens to be tax-free and one's taxable, but the two together are still how much you're basically being paid hourly to do your job. It just is one's tax-free and one's not, but it's still your income, right? Does that make sense to everybody? It is just broken down differently, but that is not your housing. That is not your travel. That is income, taxable and tax-free. I think I'm doing a good job today. Maybe, who knows? So here's my question for you. Why is it that when it comes to your overtime, your callback, and your holiday pay, the only thing your company offers you is 1.5 of your taxable income? I'll wait for you to give me a good answer. I know what the answer to the agency is going to tell you. Well, we can't pay any more tax-free because we can't increase that because we've already maxed out your taxable income, which is for the most part probably true. Some companies go less on their amount that they offer tax-free. They like to err on the side of caution. That is actually a true statement, but it is made falsely, and it is made it's not a genuine answer. It's disingenuous, which means that what they should be doing for anything that's overtime, for callback, is they should be taking those two figures together, adding that 1147 to your 50. In other words, they should be taking 6147 and multiplying that times 1.5 and paying you the full amount of whatever that is. I didn't have it in there. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you understand that both of those two figures are your income? So why is only a portion of your income being multiplied by time and a half for your holiday, your overtime, and your callback? Why isn't all of your income being multiplied by 1.5? It's because you're agreeing to not let it be. You're saying to the agency, just give me time and a half of my taxable income because it's right here and I'm going to sign my name and agree to that all day long. And all of you, almost every one of you, is saying yes to that. And now agencies are preying upon that, which means, by the way, they're keeping that $11.47 an hour times 1.5. So if I take 11.47 times 1.5 for anything overtime, that's $17.21 an hour. let's just figure times 8 hours. $137, $137.64 that week that they kept of your money. Now, the vendor's paying us, I said $10 more an hour. So let's add $10 to that. Right now it's $147.64. They kept your money. We're billing more, not billing less. Margins just went from 30% to 45, 46% for anything on overtime. Again, I talked about hours 36 to 40 a few weeks ago, so you're getting ripped off for those hours too. But when it comes to overtime, it really shows its ugly head. And for some of you, this whole episode, by the way, might be a moot point because you never do more than 36 hours. And if that's the case, then this really doesn't affect you. Then you're going to be making no different with one company versus another company, provided that you only work those 36 hours. Unless we are in fact talking about a holiday or a callback situation. Then you're right in the same boat. But if you don't work holidays and you never take call and you're only working 36 hours or you're just working 40 hours, then this episode really isn't going to affect you and you're probably not mad. But 1 hour, you're walking away from money on the table. This is a huge amount of revenue. And this is where I said, it doesn't make sense that agencies are making more money for overtime when there are hours that we didn't anticipate we would necessarily get. And this is where I hope there's a bunch of you out there going, oh man. Because every time I talk to you, that is the exact response I get from people when I say it one-on-one. So this episode is really meant to hit the masses, and I really hope that this is where you're going to go, oh my gosh, I've got to share this episode with a ton of travelers because you guys have got to turn this around. You guys all know I've been in this industry for 22 years. This is not the way the industry was 22 years ago. It is a bunch of agencies that have split off. They did it. Their parent company did it. Now the people that got mad at their parent company and started their own agency are doing it too. It is a margin multiplier, and most agencies depend upon it. So again, not only are you working 36 hours or working 40 hours, now you're coming in an extra day potentially, and you're working even harder, and the agency is making more money off of you on those hours than they would during normal. Sometimes, by the way, this actually works out that you're making less. When the rates were really big, I hope you guys follow me on this. When the bill rates were huge, I should say, when the bill rates were huge and the pay rates were bigger than they are now, time and a half of your full income, let me put it this way. When you only multiplied 1.5 of your taxable rate, many of you were not even making what your hourly rate was. You were actually making less for overtime than your full compensation was between the taxable and the non-taxable figure. I hope that makes sense. Do the math on your current contract. Let me know if that's true. As the bill rates shrink and the pay rates shrink, it's going to be less and less likely that will be the case because it hides it better. But when you guys were making $150, $160 an hour, and then your bill rate was, let's say 100, you're only making 150. It's less than what you were making. Does that all make sense? It would be less than what your typical actual hourly rate was. And some of you noticed that back about a year ago when you were talking, you were like, oh my gosh, I'm actually making less for holiday, callback, and overtime than I am making during my regular hours. But again, it's hard to see sometimes on a paycheck stub. It's hard to see how things are broken down. And more importantly, and I'll give you guys this, it's also hard to think about because most of you are not accounting people. And you're trustworthy and you believe that you're in good hands and you compare your paycheck stubs with other travelers who are getting the same exact situation with them. But I will tell you this, and this again, like I say, and I always like what I say, but it's the truth. This was not the way it was even 10 years ago, not even close. It was not like this. 10 years ago, tax advantage was complicated. Agencies struggled with how to show it and do it, but for the most part, they actually did it right. And then all of a sudden, this kind of wrinkle came in that, hey, we can kind of do this. Travelers aren't noticing that we're only paying them time and a half of their taxable, or they are, and now it's become industry standard. So most of you guys do, in fact, recognize that you're only getting paid time and a half of your taxable income for these three categories. But you just don't, I shouldn't say you don't care. I'm about to say you don't care. I think you care, but you've accepted it because it's just the way it is. And I'm telling you, it's not the way it was. So start asking. Maybe things can change a little bit. Agency profits are up. I told you this a long time ago. I even had some people on. I think I had a good friend of mine on. I did an episode talking about how much money agencies have been making. And I can attest to this. I mean, everybody on our side of the industry has, for the most part, really done very well over the last couple of years. It was an unfortunate situation that benefited travelers and it benefited agencies alike. And oftentimes it benefited the agency even more than it was benefiting you guys. I did a whole episode on that recently. So my point being, why do agencies need and feel that they need to make even more money the harder you're working? This is where my heart sinks. This is why I almost got out of the industry a few years ago, because I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. This industry sucks. This industry is yucky, for lack of a better word. When you're not proud, if you talk to a nurse, let's say, just a staff RN, and they find out that you run or are part of an agency, all of a sudden you kind of get this feeling. And I can't explain this to you guys unless you've been on this side of the desk. The nurse is looking at you like, oh, you're one of the bad guys because you guys are making all this money off of those travelers. And that's the way the industry has started becoming. And this is exactly why it's becoming that way, is because I've said to you guys many times, it feels like agencies are trying to figure out how to get more and more out of you and make more and more money. I mean, that's just what companies do. I mean, I am trying to beat them up, but that's just the way it is. Every industry out there is trying to become more profitable. We've seen that a lot, especially over the last few years. Some companies and some industries have really made a ton of money off of the backs and misfortunes of other people. I'll leave it at that. But there's been a whole ton of billions of dollars being made, especially the last few years, that it's kind of sad to see that everyone just said, okay, here you go, here's all my money, here's all my everything. And agencies are kind of in that boat. I just don't like the way it feels. And I think this is one of those things that really should make you angry. This episode, you should be going, I'm kind of getting steamed the more I'm listening to this knucklehead on the other side of this screen I'm looking at, because what he's saying is making sense to me. I never really thought about it. And you know what? I'm getting kind of angry, and I have some questions for my company. And I'm telling you, if you start questioning this, and you start asking for benefits and reason, if they say, well, we can't do it because we've done this, say, well, you're making more money, are you not? Tell me if I'm right or wrong. Do you have a higher bill rate for holiday, for callback? I mean, holiday's a different thing, by the way. Because especially if a holiday, if you're only working 36 hours and one of those shifts, 12 hours is holiday, it does affect margins in a negative way for agencies. But let's focus on overtime. If they are telling you that they are not billing more for overtime, I think they're probably lying. But ask, check, verify. It doesn't mean that they always get time and a half. I have some places that won't allow us to bill anything for overtime until after 48, even though it's only a 36-hour guarantee. So there is that. I'm going to defend some that way, but it's pretty rare. But if they constantly have overtime, they are asking you to pay the traveler time and a half, but you're not allowed to bill till after that fourth shift on a 12-hour shift, which totally stinks, because then you've got to factor that in, which means you're actually probably underpaying your traveler, hoping that they don't, hoping that they do get the 48 so you can make things right by them. And when they don't, you're really screwing the traveler. Those ones are tough. And it's really, I know I just talked out of both sides of my mouth, and that was kind of confusing. But for the most part, we're able to bill more after 40 hours. And obviously after 8 hours daily in California. So when the agency tells you they can't pay you all of your time and a half based upon your full income, all taxable. I don't know if I even said that. That's what's important, is that when you're getting paid holiday, overtime, callback, those two incomes together combined, and I know I didn't say this now, this is where I told you I'd forget something, but this is a really important thing. Multiply by 1.5 should all be paid, and you should be completely taxed on it, which means the agency is going to get completely taxed on it, which means sometimes those margins really shrink. And that's where an agency will say, hey, we've got to pay full. If we did what you said we had to do, and we had to pay you all this money and have to pay payroll taxes on all of it, we're barely going to make anything. We're actually going to lose money. Probably not going to lose money, but they may barely make anything. Their margins may drop down to $5 an hour as opposed to the 25 or 30 that they're making. And my answer is, so what? It's still $5 more than they thought they were going to make, times 8 hours plus all the time, plus the 4 hours of hours 36 to 40. So it's still extra revenue. So why would they care? It's extra money that they weren't counting on. It is not going to be at that 30, 32, 33% margin that most companies are enjoying right now, which is horrific. It could be less. What if it was only at a 5% or 10% margin? So what? You're the one that's doing all the work. You're the one that's making all the money. Why are they making more money and they should be happy making barely anything? It is a additional income for them. A dollar's a dollar. So why would they complain about making a couple of bucks that they weren't anticipating? But that's not the way the agency works, and that's why it's gotten yucky, in my opinion. Absolutely yucky. I told you guys, I'm not the enemy here. I'm just telling you guys what's happening. So you guys have your eyes opened up a little bit more. And again, I know I see things on Facebook all the time that let's change the world, let's change the industry. And a lot of times what travelers are making the call to arms about are things you can't change. Like let's not take a pay rate less than this amount of money. Well, somebody will. So there's some things you can't change. I truly believe the more people that you share this episode with, you share episode number 9, you share episode number 41, and anything where I'm talking about margins and how you guys are not getting paid properly, and you start questioning that with more and more agencies out there, more and more people are going to cave and go, okay, we'll do it. You can change the industry on something like this back to what it was. Now, what you might be doing is actually driving your hourly margin less and less, because some agencies are going to take that demand, give it to you, and make it up elsewhere. But I do think over time, agencies will start to realize that we've got to get back to what is a reasonable margin for what I said at the very beginning of this episode is, and that is for what it is that we in fact do, which I truly believe is pretty minimal. And like I said, it's getting less and less. You start taking a lot of the front end load out of what we do, and you really are talking about just floating payroll and handling insurance, paying people properly, and credentialing them and making sure that they're compliant and handling any issues that you have while you're on the road. What's that worth? And I do not believe, by the way, it should be worth 30+% of what hospitals are paying. I just don't believe that. After, by the way, the vendors have taken out their 5 or 7% fee, still making 30% of that. Doesn't make sense. Let's talk about an example. I want to bring this home, then I'll let you guys go here. I looked up a job just before I came out here, and I actually pulled our numbers off. So I want to use some real numbers for a job, and I won't mention what it is, but it's, they're still seeing some really good positions. One of the jobs that one of my people applied to still had a $4,160.03 weekly gross income. And again, the way this is broken down is $83.47 were taxable. There was a $483 weekly tax-free. This was based upon a 36-hour work week. And then there was a housing stipend. So if you do the math on that, if you look at what that truly is, if you take $483 and you divide that by 36, it's, I don't have to write that down. It's what did I do? Oh, let's do it here. 483, I don't think I wrote it down, divided by 36, $13.42 an hour. I did write it down. That is how much that 483 comes to hourly based upon a 36-hour work week. So the total compensation for this position is $83.47 plus $13.42, which means you really are making $96.89 on this particular assignment with my particular company, right? I'm not telling you where the job is, so you can't, there's no whatever, so it doesn't matter. That is what the compensation is for in this particular case. So bottom line is that that $13.42, I've already told you, go back and listen to episode number 41. If you aren't getting that fully taxed added to your compensation for anything between 36 and 40, and at a full taxable rate for that full hour, which would be, what did I write that down? Yeah, $96.89. In this case, you take $83.47, you would add that $13.42, and between hours 36 and 40, you should be making $96.89 and getting taxed fully on $96.89 because you've maxed out your tax-free amount. You're crazy. So now you take that figure, it's the $96.89 that really should be multiplied by 1.5, not the $83.47 taxable only, which would mean in this case, your overtime should be at $145.34 for this position. And it shouldn't matter to the company if they're even losing a couple bucks because they've made money on you for potentially probably hours 36 to 40 because they're not paying you properly, and they're not losing money. Trust me, they're not. If you took that figure, and I'm just going to take some situations. By the way, that's $20.12. It's $13.42 times 1.5, which means you're losing that tax-free amount hourly, which is $13.42, multiplied by 1.5, which is $20.12. It's only $20.12. But if it's 8 hours, that you're doing it for that week, and let's just say you only do that once or so every month. Throw in a couple of holidays, throw in a few callbacks. I did some quick rough numbers. Said let's say the whole entire year, you had 280 hours of overtime, callback, and holiday pay. By the way, if you do that, if you think about that and kind of multiply that or divide that by the number of weeks in a year, it's not that much. It's for a lot of you guys are doing that, especially with the on-call and being called back in. If you're in PACU, if you're in OR, if you're a surge tech, that happens pretty frequently. If you had those 280 hours, you're talking about $5,633.60 every year that you are letting your agency have that you're not having. And again, if you guys wonder, why does that seem like a big deal? If you took just 100 travelers, we're talking about $563,000, over $500,000 in just 100 travelers. Now, how many agencies have 500 travelers, right? $2.8 million a year. The agency just kept of their travelers' money. This is why this is such a big deal. It may not seem like a big deal to you. Well, I guess for $5,600 a year, I can walk away. By the way, all taxable. And let's be frank. I don't mind that so much, which I think is an insane thing for some of you to think about. But the reason that agencies do this is because a lot of agencies, an average size agency is 500 travelers. I mean, a good size agency, 500 travelers. Those are guys that are making really solid money. We're talking about $2.8 million a year just on that. If every traveler was doing that, not every traveler is. So think about those companies that have a lot more than 500. Think about the kind of millions of dollars that they're bringing in just on holiday, callback, and overtime. Mostly on the overtime for a lot of you. It's significant. This is big boy, big girl figures. And that's why it drives me so nuts, because when you really start bringing it to an economy of scale and start talking about the full amount of people that are working out there, how many travelers are there out there? It's a hard figure to think about, but I know at one point it was well over 50,000 travelers between allied and nursing. That is a huge billions of dollars of revenue that goes out there that unfortunately doesn't see its way oftentimes a traveler itself. Now, I just threw out some really big figures, and I may be completely off on some of those, but I know when I was doing some research on how many total travelers there was a pretty good figure, and then of course everything changed. And everything's changed back again, so it's really hard to say. But there's a number of companies out there that do statistics. I will let you know what the 2022 average number of travelers were out there between allied and nursing. We'll see how close I was. But we're talking about at least hundreds of millions of dollars out there. This is big stuff. And unfortunately, the industry has gotten to a point where this is what makes me kind of go, ugh. I don't always want to tell, especially, if I'm out and I'm having, dinner with some friends and I meet somebody, or, and it's, I find out that he or she's a nurse, or they're working as a PT. I'm like, I don't want them to know what I do, because if they have any idea about the traveling aspect of what they do, they're instantly going to think, oh, the reputation of agencies has suffered. And it didn't used to be like that. We used to be the guys, everyone's like, oh, I want to go work for them because they're making this money and this revenue and all this stuff happen for me. And now you guys, I've always said this, you kind of have your guard up to say, who's the least yucky of all of them that I can actually feel like I can work for? And that's not the way it should be. It really isn't. But together we can evolve it. I told you guys this was going to be one of those episodes, and I hope it delivered, because I'm passionate about this, and it's important. The industry can be fixed, and for all of you out there that are on my side of the desk that just got really mad, stop for a second. Think about how much money you can still make by doing things properly and by taking care of travelers. I mean, here's a revolutionary idea. How about grow your agency because a bunch of people want to go to work for you, not because you're trying to nickel and dime them every single penny, and it's not pennies we're talking about on every assignment. There could be something there, I don't know, that maybe, word of mouth, because, I don't know, travelers kind of talk, actually might go somewhere. We can fix it. Guys, I appreciate you. I hope you appreciated this one. I'll catch you next time on Travel Evolved.